chair is introduce the speaker. Yay! So tonight's speaker is our music liturgy coordinator. He used to be in charge of life team at St. Catherine's in Toledo, Ohio. He is pretty awesome. I will admit his fiance is slightly more awesome. Sorry, ladies, mistaken. Tonight I introduce to you, all the way from Catholic to atheist, back to Catholic, Nicholas de la Tour, or Nicholas of the Tower.
Thank you, Emily. That was really not necessary. But so yeah, the title of tonight, From Atheist to Catholic, as Emily sort of hinted at just now, is not quite sufficient to the truth of the story. It's more like from Catholic, or at least cradle Catholic, to Protestant to atheist to Protestant to Catholic. So I just figured I really hate reading, and instead of reading and researching all these different faith, lines and religions, I just thought I'd try them all. That's not true, but here is the truth. My name is Nick, and I was born into a Cuban-American family. That means that I was made with Cuban parts in the U.S., and I actually have a t-shirt that says that. But what goes along with that is that, as most Cubans, I was born into a Catholic household. And so we were brought up going to Mass every Sunday, praying before every meal extensively, praying on Christmas morning before opening gifts extensively. It was really, really exciting childhood. And I really, really grew to love prayer, which is also not true. I actually was sort of drawn away from it, and it sort of caused me to sort of not understand what prayer was really about. It's not about we have to do this. It's not about we have to make sure that the food gets cold before we eat it. It's not about those things. I didn't understand at the time that it was about communicating with God, the creator of the universe, Jesus Christ, Holy Spirit. I didn't get that back then. Most kids might not understand that, but my parents had the best of intentions, and it was really, really beautiful to grow up in a house that did pray. A lot of people don't get that. But, like I said, it sort of led me away from how much of it there was. Sort of, as a kid, it led me to not really appreciate it the way that I might today, and hopefully will continue to grow in the future. So as a result of that, in my Catholic Cuban family, we move up here to Ohio, God knows why, and I'm from Florida, by the way, and I go to a parochial school, that's a Catholic elementary school, and junior high, all the years of my schooling, and basically, that was also really, really helpful to my faith. And the reason I say that is because I had some really great teachers at every single turn that were just showing me what it was like to live a life like Christ, to be Christ to everyone. They were extremely kind and loving to all of the students. They were very forgiving. Any of you that have gone to a Catholic school, can you all agree with me? I mean, yeah, that's just not the truth at all. A Catholic school, it had good intentions. It had a great start. The reasons for Catholic schooling to have started were great, great reasons, very, very important to society. Today, it's more of a harmful thing, unfortunately, in most situations. There are, of course, exceptions. There are teachers here and there that are, amazing, but that is not the case by and large, unfortunately. It's very, very sad. So in my situation, I already was coming from this place of yay, let's pray again. I was already coming from that place, and then, the teachers in my Catholic school were teaching me all these really important life skills, like honesty and forgiveness and compassion and love, and I was just really? Show me by example, right? And I just wasn't seeing that, so I was, again, that was taking me further from the Lord. However, all the while, it was giving me a foundation, even though I wasn't learning the life of Christ, from my teachers' actions and their interactions with me, the history that I was learning and the truths of the faith, the groundwork was being laid for when I would, make a comeback in the future. But that's later. So, had this groundwork laid. I'm doing all the sacraments. I had my first Holy Communion, 2nd grade, and my first confession, and then in 8th grade, I did confirmation. Everyone in here get confirmed, or how many people in here got confirmed in junior high? Okay, raise your hand if you had a completely full understanding of the awesome power and incredible sacrament that the sacrament of confirmation was when you did it. Yeah, so it's really, really awesome that we all did it at that age. And the thing, I speak about it sarcastically, but at the same time, I'm not kidding, because that was there for me, again, for later when I would come back, and I'll get back to that. So I go to high school. I go to a public high school, Bowling Green High School, and lo and behold, it turns out that not everybody is Catholic. Who would have known? No, actually, I had a Jewish kid that was in my Catholic school with me every year that I was there, so that was really interesting. But aside from that kid, I didn't know anyone else was also not Catholic. All kidding aside, I was definitely exposed to a lot of things that I did not understand before that point. Exposed to a lot of ideas and a lot of, things that I regret, unfortunately. High school, it's not like it's because it was a public high school. Private high schools, Catholic high schools, you're going to find similar situations for different kinds of reasons, At a Catholic high school, maybe there's drug use because they have more money, so they have more access to drugs in that way. It's not because it was a public high school, but my situation, my experience was that it was a public high school, and all of a sudden I had all these friends that were, whether they were Protestant or, Hindu or, atheist by that point, or I had just a whole variety of people that I was encountering and learning from, unfortunately. I started to attend all of my friends' different churches, so I've pretty much attended every church that exists in Bowling Green, except for the ones that have started since I was in high school. And unfortunately that's a reality too, but we'll get to that later. So I've experienced all of these different Christian faiths, and I'm starting to just sort of get this sense of like, this isn't right. Like, there's something weird about this. Why? Everyone talks about how the Bible, there's one Christianity, there's one faith, but then like that's coming from a whole bunch of different people that all disagree with each other, and I was just sort of starting to feel like this doesn't really seem legitimate. Or legit is probably the word I was using back then. And I was just sort of getting the sense that this wasn't real. If God is real, He has to be as real as, this podium, right? And what I mean by that is that this podium has one truth. I don't care who you are or what you believe, when you take a measuring stick to this podium or measuring tape, it's going to be the same height, universally. There's one truth about this podium. And that is the case for anything that is true, is that there is one truth about that truth. And I wasn't seeing that in Christianity. And it was kind of disturbing me. And by this point, I wasn't really going to Mass anymore, except to play music sometimes, but it wasn't about the Mass, it was about the music when I did. So my senior year, I meet this, junior year I met her, but senior year I start dating this really fantastic girl. Her name is Alina, and she is today my fiance, but that's a long drawn-out story. That was 6 years ago. Graduated in 2006, and that was my senior year that we started dating. She's from a very strong Christian family. They're Protestant. They themselves wouldn't have identified themselves as any particular denomination of Protestant. They would sort of lightheartedly joke around about being church hoppers. But they were Christian, and they had a really, really beautiful dedication to the Lord and a love for Christ. They went to church every Sunday, a different one, but they did. And as I started my relationship with Alina, I was going to church with her more and more. Not always, but progressively more and more. And I was just sort of starting to get disillusioned more and more by Christianity because of seeing all of those, inconsistencies and, all the different attitudes and thoughts about the one true God, supposedly, right? And so it's just like, it just didn't seem right, In the scientific community, if scientists don't agree on something, then they don't presume that it's, officially true until, so many scientists confirm that that something is real, by replicating the experiments and whatnot. And so, in a dissimilar way, in Christianity, everyone seemed perfectly content with accepting something as true, even though almost nobody else might agree with them, using the same source, the Bible, right? And at this point, I was just like, you know what, this is really not, I mean, you gotta be kidding me. You really expect, and I kept asking questions, and I was just like, if you say this, then, what about this? And I just kept, the answer I kept getting, I wrote this down, it's in quotes here. The answer I kept getting is, you must have faith like a child. You must have faith like a child. That's the attitude of so many Christians out there, right? And then we wonder why scientists laugh at Christianity. You must have faith like a child. Don't ask questions, in other words. Don't ask questions we can't answer, in other words, right? And I'm someone that, is very, geeky and scientific and stuff, and I was a computer science major for a while in college and stuff. I'm very systematic in the way that I think about things and very logical, and that did not work for me. So I was just like, screw this. And I stopped going to church for a while. Eventually, I told Alina I'm going to move to Florida, and this was pretty soon after high school. And when I went down to Florida, that was, first of all, I'll just say right up front, that was like the biggest mistake of my life. But on the other hand, I did learn a lot from the experience, like most mistakes. So I moved down to Florida, and I'm down there living with some family, but pretty alone through the whole situation because I'm going to school and working at Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. And from the start of the day to the end, it basically looked like I get up at 6, I'm on the bus by 7 o'clock to then get to the Metro Rail station to spend 2 hours on that to then get to class by 10, and then I'm done with class by 6 maybe, get to Bubba Gump Shrimp Company at Bayside, and then I wasn't really home until about 1 a.m. because of the Metro Rail back and then the bus back. And basically I lived my whole existence in Miami pretty lonely, even though I was technically living with family. In the midst of that loneliness, and I'm a musician, for those of you that don't know, and I started music in high school. So in the midst of that loneliness, I have this uncle, God love him, he's a great guy, he has a great heart, has his interesting points of view on life, and he was attending at the time this church called Unity. And this uncle of mine lives out a homosexual lifestyle, and one of the things about this church that they, proclaimed as a reason to come there was that their attendance was about 75% homosexual, and all of their pastors were homosexual. And, I have, anyways, so I just don't want to get too far from the story and then start like this whole other trail of story, but basically, this uncle of mine approaches me, and he sings as well, and he's in the choir of this church called Unity, and he says, Nick, you're not really doing much music right now, would you want to sing in the choir for this church that I go to? And at this point, I was just like, sure, why not? As bizarre as all the things that he's told me are about this church, why not sing? And get the opportunity to do some solos in front of people, whatever. So I start singing in the choir of this church called Unity, and it's how many people in here have heard of something called New Age Christianity? Okay, good. About, maybe 40% of you. New Age Christianity was quite an experience for me at this church. It was something that I was not ready for, something I didn't expect. He told me it was a Christian church. They read the Bible during their services, and they sing gospel music. But what I didn't know ahead of time was that they also are into fusing Christianity with all of these Eastern Indian religions and stuff, and just some really weird whoa, hold on a second, give me a second to process what you're doing right now. I mean, they were into the chakras, I don't know if you've heard of that, and meditation, and Catholics are into meditation, but in a good way, not in weird ways. And I mean, I'm talking about things where people would be praying to Mother, Father, God, and they would put their hands on your shoulders and say, "Do you feel the energy that I'm passing into your body right now?" And I'm just like, Yeah. Do you feel that energy, that love, that warmth? Yeah. I mean, I was just sort of going with it because I was like, whatever, what else is there to do with my time on Sundays, the one day that I don't have to go to school and stuff. So it was a pretty bizarre experience, but what I saw there was just people basically coming into this church with whatever beliefs they wanted to have, and that church saying, it's cool, hang on to that, and let's actually incorporate that into what we believe and see what comes out, right? Really, that's what they were doing, and that's what New Age Christianity essentially is like. It's let's see what crazy concoctions we can make of theology, and sort of give it a Christian label and sell it to people, and they'll eat it up, and they do. I mean, these Unity churches, that was a chain. That church was Unity on the Bay. There's Unity of Fort Lauderdale, and Unity. I mean, that was becoming a chain of churches. And people were eating it up. I mean, thousands of people in their congregation per service and making money, donating money. At times I was wondering if it verged on Scientology because of the way that they ask you to donate money and stuff. Anyways, I digress. The point is that I witnessed some strange things, and I witnessed this culture of believe whatever you want. And I don't know if there are any non-Catholics in the room right now that are Christian but of another denomination, but even if you are a Protestant Christian, I'm sure that what I'm explaining to you sounds pretty ridiculous. Raise your hand if you think that sounds ridiculous. Okay, yeah, it is. And what's interesting to think about, though, or to realize, is that it's not so different from what's happening in Christianity. Okay, it's really, really not. Joe Schmo can grab the Bible and look at a line in Scripture and say, men can beat their wives, as long as it sticks thin enough. The Bible says that, right? There is some sentence within the Bible somewhere that it says that just enough that he can suck that out of it and start a church based on that. I know a deacon who, his uncle in Canada quit his job at a factory in his 60s and decided to start a church in his garage with his wife. No biblical training whatsoever. And by the time he died in his 80s, what started out with about 4 to 5 people in his garage was thousands of people in a church building. And that's how the church was started. So try to tell me that that's not exactly the same thing as the New Age Christianity and what's happening there. Protestant attitudes towards the Bible create a problem because anyone can approach that. I'm digressing again. I'm sorry. Let's do this. Okay. Where was I here? So, must have faith like a child. Nobody agrees with each other. Christianity today, there's 40,000 denominations of Christianity. So what does that mean? What is the translation of 40,000 denominations? The translation of that is 40,000 disagreements or disagreeing viewpoints about God and what He wants from us. And what if I told you that there were 40,000 disagreeing viewpoints on the exact measurements of this podium? That's just ridiculous. We know that there's one truth about this podium. And if someone disagreed with you, if you had a measuring stick up to it and you were saying this is exactly 4 feet or 3.5 feet or whatever it is, and I can prove it by showing you this measuring stick, and then someone else comes up to you and says, that's not what I believe though. And I don't care what you believe, this is 3.5 feet. Yeah, but don't try to impose your beliefs on me, because that's not what I want to believe. I'm more comfortable with thinking that it's 6 feet. But that's what it is today. So there's 40,000 different versions of what God might want from us. So my New Age, with my New Age experience and the Protestant stuff behind me, from what I'd observed and what I was frustrated about, I was like, that's it. I am officially atheist. End of story. And I'm never going back. And then Alina and I broke up. And I was like, I had an attitude about it. I was like, we got in an argument once, poor girl, and I was just like totally reaming her with like, how can you believe this crap? Haven't you seen like what's happening? Like, there's no way that God actually exists. And, there was crying involved, and I was being a complete jerk. And, it's a wonder, it's a miracle, truly, by the grace of God, that she's still with me today. But so eventually, despite those religious differences, a few months later, we were just like, we realized that we were still in love with each other. I moved back to Ohio, blah blah blah, super mushy stuff, and then so then I started going to church with her and her family. Still, having every bit of the doubts that I had. I was still an atheist, going to church with her and her family just to please them. Started playing congas in the band. It was a Protestant church here in town called BG Covenant. I was playing congas in their praise band, and I was being completely what's the word? I was just being completely false. I was participating in this praise music and helping to lead this praise music when the whole time I was thinking, what's wrong with these people? Are they psychotic? Like, I thought every Christian in the world was like schizophrenic or something. And I was there, helping them to lead the worship in this God that they believed in. And it was pretty ugly. I've seen some ugly days. And then this thing started to happen when I would sit there through the sermons and be invested into this praise music slowly but surely. This thing started to happen where I was starting to feel this sense of, I didn't have words for it. I was confused by it at first, and I started to feel this tug at my heart, and it gradually over time started to evolve into this thing where it was like, whoa, I was actually praising for a second. What was I thinking? And before I knew it, I was actually invested into this. And then I was actually attending this church as a member, and I was actually praising with the praise band. And I didn't have any way to explain it, because I still had all the same questions, I still had all the same doubts, but I couldn't explain the fact that despite those doubts, something was happening. And I was kind of weirded out by it. I didn't really talk to anyone about it. But it was what it was. And so I started to let it sort of engulf me a little bit more. And eventually I had to face myself with the reality that these questions were still there. My heart wanting this does not replace the fact that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so I started to ask the same questions. And I started to hear the same answers again. Have faith like a child. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me, not this again. And I was starting to get disappointed again, but then I realized, when I started to really ask these questions, I wasn't asking them to the Catholic Church. I wasn't asking them these questions to anyone that had any knowledge of Catholic theology and doctrine, and I just realized that it was the one thing that I completely ruled out because of my upbringing and my sort of just falling away from it in high school. So I was open to going to this Christopher West conference. I actually came to a meeting just like Veritas. It was called something else back then. And at the one meeting that I happened to go to, just because they announced this Christopher West guy was coming into town, and he was going to talk about sex. I was like, all right, let's go. I like sex. Let's do this. And so I go to this presentation with Alina, who I'm dating at the time, and I was blown away. I was like, I did not see that coming whatsoever. Who in here knows anything about theology of the body? Okay, that's a good number of you. If you don't know about it, you will soon. This group can't really help but talk about it, so you will hear about it. But basically, he was talking about this thing called theology of the body, which is a work of Pope John Paul II, our belated Pope, and he really blew my mind. I had no idea that any Christian faith, any Christian religion was, first of all, open to talking about sex the way that the Catholic Church seemed to be, and then the way that they talked about it was really, really interesting. But one thing, more than anything else, stood out to me, and it was, and I didn't see this coming. I was really thrown off guard by it, because it was sort of like it was meant for my issues. It was meant for the things that I was struggling with in terms of believing in God. And he said to me, it wasn't a one-on-one, it was like a big presentation. He said that less than 100 years ago, every single Christian denomination in existence was not only opposed to contraceptives, but believed that contraceptives were evil, intrinsically evil. And that blew me away. I was like, wait, everybody agreed about something at one point? And then he followed that up by saying, but today, the only church that still teaches the same thing without wavering is the Catholic Church. And I just had to sit there for a second. I was like, okay, wait a second, what does this mean? That means that at one point everyone agreed on this, and that the Catholic Church had the guts, despite society, despite the pressure of what everyone wanted, to stand by that for 100 years. And to this day, when it receives the criticisms that it does, it still stands by that to this day. And I was just like, this is interesting. This is more the kind of thing I was looking for. And then in researching that more, becoming more a part of the group, I just started learning more about that theology of the body. I started studying scripture. Andrew Reinhardt, who at the time was working at St. Tom's, really sort of helped me along with those things in many ways, as well as several other individuals. And I just started to really realize, like, that's not the only thing that the church has stood by. Like, that applies to pretty much anything you can think of that the church teaches. And the thing that's craziest to me about it is that it goes back 2,000 years. Can you plug the laptop there real quick? I'm going to show you guys something really, really interesting. So once I learned that the Catholic Church has never changed any matter of moral theology or doctrine, I'm going to actually show something else real quick that's on here. Okay. Something I thought was interesting to learn was also how each of the churches started. So this list that I'm going to show you here, from bottom to top, shows you chronologically backwards when the significant varieties of Christianity were started. Okay? So here in the 90s, you see various non-denominational denominations starting here in the U.S. In 82, Rick Warren started Saddleback in California. And the list goes on here. United Methodist was started in 1968 by Methodist and United Brethren, so that must be like a combination of things. Calvary Chapel, Chuck Smith started that in 1965. United Church of Christ was started in 1961. And if you're like tirelessly writing this down, I see a couple of you writing this down like crazy, like if you're going to lose it. I'll tell you where to find this. And I just see here like all of these different churches were started so recently by any regular Joe Schmo that decided he disagreed with everyone else, and he knew better, right? And you just see example after example. 1800s, the Mormon religion, 1830. The Methodist Church, 1739, started by John and Charles Wesley. The Baptist Church started in 1609 by John Smith. Presbyterian, 1560. Calvinist, Anglican, Lutheran by Martin Luther. And then you get to the top of the list, and you do a 1,000-year jump. And I was just like, what the crap? Jesus started this church? More people should know about this. Jesus started this church? What else do you need? I mean, and what's wild is that, according to this, the year 33, but what's wild is that going back all of those 2,000 years, the same is still true. For those 2,000 years, nothing has changed in the theology, in the teachings, right? The theology and the teachings have matured, right? Okay, can I ask you to stand up for a second? What is your name?
Melissa.
Melissa. Everyone have a look at lovely Melissa. Thank you for doing this, Melissa.
Absolutely.
Okay, how old are you?
I am 19.
19. When Melissa is 19 right now, look at Melissa. When you were an infant,
Yes.
were you exactly as you are now?
Do you mean physically?
Physically, visually.
No,
If we saw you as an infant, would we recognize you?
probably not.
Why?
Because I'm completely different.
You're completely different. Interesting. But I think a more accurate way of saying it is that you have grown and matured physically, right, and have evolved from what you started as, but you are still the same Melissa, right?
Yes.
You're still the same Melissa. So infant Melissa is still Melissa, as the same Melissa as this Melissa, only separated by 19 years. They look completely different, probably. I would hope, otherwise that's pretty weird. They look completely different, but they're the exact same person. Thank you, Melissa. Let's give her a round of applause. What's significant about this is that in the year 33, according to this, when Jesus Christ started the Catholic Church, did it look different? Yes. Okay? But was it the same church? Yes. It's matured, it's grown, it's learned about itself. Melissa, have you learned about yourself in the last 19 years?
I have quite a bit.
That's wonderful. Will you continue to learn about yourself?
Absolutely.
That's awesome. That's awesome. A great example of that is the theology of the body, that Pope John Paul II worked on in his lifetime. That was in the recent past. The theology of the body was put together in the recent past. It was a new way of teaching a truth, a new perspective of looking at sexuality, but it wasn't something that was a different approach in the sense that it didn't contradict older theologies. Okay? So it didn't change the theology of the church, it matured the theology of the church. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You mean, like,
Thanks, Jay.
it adapted more to like today's like society and like just adapted more to society, I guess today kind of.
Great question. Did it adapt? I want to say no, because adaptation would imply that it changed for the sake of society, when that's exactly what the Catholic Church refuses to do with contraceptives, for example. But along similar lines, seeing what the needs are in society, it addressed things in a way that society needed them to be addressed, but it didn't change things for society. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's why.
Would you say that's fair, Andrew? Beautiful. Andrew is somewhat of an authority on theology of the body in this room anyways. So, in case you're wondering why I delegated to him for that. All right. Does that respond to that? Okay. All right. So, any questions really quickly on that? No? Beautiful. Okay. So, looking back at my atheism, it's just sort of a bizarre thing for me to think about the fact that I was atheist, because it's like, how could I have ever been so illogical? Okay? And that might seem like somewhat of an ironic statement, because the very argument for atheism, they believe anyways, to be that they are the logical ones, that people of faith are illogical. They really, really bank on their logic and their reason, and they think that people that have faith do not have reason. So, I wanted to show you an example, a really, really good example, of just what it looks like to be logical like an atheist. What I'm about to show you is, can you go to the other thing? Yes. And then hit full screen on the bottom right of it. Yes. What I'm about to show you is a small minute clip, minute and a half or so, from a documentary. Oh no. But we saved your place, please click, hit refresh and then
that one.
Alright, it's a small little clip from a documentary called, might want to pause it as soon as it, a documentary called The Story of Everything by Stephen Hawking, who is one of the world's leading atheists. The man is, to give credit where credit is due, the man is actually a pretty brilliant astrophysicist, and I love watching and reading his stuff because he actually knows what he's talking about with most things. And if you watch this documentary for everything except for the statement I'm about to show you, it's pretty enlightening, because you see the glory and the majesty of the creation of God truly manifested, because you see the way that things were formed, and I'm not talking about evolution necessarily, I'm talking about like just the universe, how the universe was put together, and it's really magnificent to see, his explanation of things, and his logic is truly astounding when it comes to this statement. So let's go ahead and play that.
But one thing often troubles people when they hear this story. Our good section is